This is certainly no kind of narrative history of World War II. Instead, what it is a kind of a project manager's approach to understanding how the Allies accomplished their main goals. Now, the main goal, of course, was the unconditional surrender of the Axis, Japan and Germany in particular. And what Paul Kennedy does is to break that goal down into 5 subsidiary goals that the Allies had to get control over in order to accomplish the main point, that unconditional surrender. The first of the 5 was control of the Atlantic, because what they wanted to do was to keep Britain in the war and safe as in terms of being a launching pad for the invasion of the continent. So you've got control of the Atlantic. Number 2, they had to get control of the air. Now, that's not completely distinct from control of the Atlantic, because they needed planes with sufficient range to track down and hunt U-2 boats, which were, through 1942, were having a field day in terms of destroying ships and convoys coming from the United States to both UK and Russia. Third, their target was to figure out how to deal with blitzkrieg, a really novel form of warfare that involved the mutual support of air forces, infantry, and armor that the Germans had perfected, and they needed to get their arms around that. They had to figure out all the logistical, technical problems involved in amphibious landings. After all, they're going to have to put millions of men onto a hostile shore, namely Europe, in 1943 or 1944, when they were actually going to pull it off. They had to master that, and it wasn't just for Europe, but it was also for the Pacific. And then finally, in terms of the Pacific, they had to figure out how to overcome the enormous, vast distances that are involved in going after Japan. The Pacific is just plain enormous. So what he does, what Paul Kennedy does, is to look at how particular changes in technology, tactics, and organization took place, particularly in the Allied camp, to accomplish these subsidiary goals, all in aid of the ultimate unconditional surrender of Germany and Japan. Very, very interesting book. And there are a number of things that are going to jump out at you when you read it. Things like the development of the Merlin engine and how they married that up with the P-51 fighter, the Mustang. The role of the Seabees in terms of helping to overcome these enormous distances in the Pacific. The development of the Hedgehog mortar system, which gave convoy escorts a much more effective way of hunting down, tracking U-2 submarines. So, to say the book is interesting is an understatement. It absolutely is. It's thought-provoking. Now, I'm not going to say it's any kind of a substitute for narrative histories of campaigns, battles, things like that. And there's still plenty of stuff to be interested and, quite frankly, inspired by the people who did the fighting, all the way from the generals down to the privates and the sailors who conducted World War II. But the reality is that this book really certainly enhanced my understanding of how the Allies were able to put it all together. Now, both the Japanese and the Germans did some similar stuff where they experimented with new technology, they reorganized and developed stuff to enable them to handle their campaigns. The fact of the matter is that the Allies did a whole lot more of it, they did it a whole lot better, And they were very extraordinarily adaptive in terms of how they managed and organized this colossal effort. So, Paul Kennedy, the Engineers of Victory, it is just an excellent perspective on World War II. I thoroughly recommend it. Well worth your time if you haven't read it yet. I'll see you next week with something else to recommend. Everybody have yourselves a good week in the meantime.